What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Today, I want to share with you what I believe are the 5 biggest mistakes people make when growing their own seedlings and transplanting. Let's go! The first mistake I often see being made when people starting their own seedlings is overwatering. Like the old saying goes, too much of anything isn't a good thing. So when your plants are overwatered, oftentimes you actually see some yellowing of the leaves. The reason this happens is because roots need oxygen to survive and to thrive. So if they're constantly sitting in water and they're not going to get that oxygen, they'll actually go anaerobic, which means without oxygen. One of the main factors that leads to this is if you don't have adequate drainage on the bottom of your cups or pots or whatever you're growing in. You'll notice that we're dripping a little here because it just rained here, so they got some water. But when there's too much water, it can drain out the bottom, which is so important. You don't want sitting water at the bottom. That'll make your soil go anaerobic, which will just kill off your roots. My favorite way to judge when your plants actually should be watered is pretty simple, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And it has to do with the weight. So what you want to do is after you water your plant, say it's a tomato like this, which is getting actually pretty large, what you want to do is feel the weight when it's full of water after it's been watered. That'll give you an idea of when you should water, because when you come back, if the cup's very light, then you'll have a good idea that you should actually be watering this because it doesn't have adequate moisture. Tomatoes are often better. It's actually better when you can water them from the bottom instead of just watering from the top. You'll notice how I have trays right here. They aren't just for conveniently carrying the tomatoes around. It's actually so when I water, I'll have a little bit of water that I can water from the bottom, let it sit, and the tomatoes will actually pull that water from the tray. And then I'll actually know that they're actually getting good water because the tray will dry out. We don't want a lot of sitting water at the bottom, but we want to have enough that they can actually take it up. The second mistake I often see being made when people start their own seedlings has to do with not having adequate light, leading to weak and leggy plants. Let me take you to the greenhouse and show you what I've grown in there. I've got some bigger tomatoes in here, but you'll notice there's some spots missing where there aren't any trays. Those are the tomatoes that I have outside, getting them used to those outside temperatures. As I move forward here, you'll notice that the plants in here aren't very leggy. They're relatively short and stocky and strong. That's ideally what you'd like when growing your seedlings. And like I said, the legginess often comes from not having enough adequate sunlight for those plants when they're young. They're trying to reach up and look for that light. And it could also be caused by too high of temperatures. So when seedlings are small, you want to keep the temperatures relatively low, but you also want to have a lot of light. Actually, seedlings need more intense light than the full-grown plants, so giving them a good start is always important. That's why I like to use this greenhouse here, and you'll notice we've got a lot of windows, all on the south side, and also some windows up top here. So as much natural light as you can, but if you feel like you're not getting enough natural light, you could add additional lighting, which could help, things like fluorescent lights. And if you're growing on a windowsill, what you might like to do is, say you have plants that are growing in one direction, you just going to want to come through and rotate them so that they're not just used to going one way. Another thing you'd like to do is have some a proper amount of wind, which you can create just by having a small fan on there. So they're a little stronger, stockier plants. The third mistake I often see being made by people growing seedlings, getting them ready for transplanting, has to do with allowing the plants to actually get root bound in the pots that they're in. So as you can see, this plant's getting relatively large for the pot, and a good indication if your plant is getting root bound is you'll see out the bottom, you can see that some of the roots are starting to poke through the drainage holes. That means we're getting close to being root bound, although it's not, but it's a great indication that it's time to set out your transplants. If your plants, for instance a tomato here, are actually flowering when they're in the pots at this young age, that's an indication that it's root bound. And that's not what you want, because if they flower when they're stressed out like this and root bound, that's actually going to reduce the amount of fruit you're going to get in the future. When it comes to gardening and even making the videos, one thing I notice is that basically everyone loves seeing the harvest. But in my opinion, the true value is how we get there, the steps that it takes. Because the road to the harvest is rarely straight. It's usually winding and it's bumpy. It's not really that smooth. So those little bumps in the road, those little mishaps that can happen to me, I like to share those. That's why I love making these videos, so that I can share with some of those things, some of those bumps that I've seen, so you can help avoid them, so you can get a straighter path, so I can get you to the harvest quicker and easier with less stress. Looks like we got the little garden security guy. He's not just on security though, he's trying to steal some of our asparagus. I love to have him in here, but sometimes he's just a little greedy, as you can see. He sniffs around, and after he makes his round, making sure that there's no critters and stuff in the garden, he wants to go for his pay. And sometimes he takes pretty hefty pay. but he's a good guy, and it's fortunate we have plenty of asparagus growing. And not only is he a great guard dog for the garden, but he's also a good companion to have in here. He makes it more fun. When I see him out enjoying himself, I learn from that, and it sometimes makes me step back and just enjoy what we have and be appreciative of it. But let me get him before he eats all the asparagus. The fourth mistake that I often see people making when it comes to growing their seeds and getting them ready for transplant has to do with not properly hardening them off. So hardening off just basically means taking your seeds from like the indoor area to the outdoor area where they're going to be in a kind of slow transition. So dependent upon where your seeds were growing, so for instance, I'm in the greenhouse here and I've got a door open and I also have a little slot that I keep open. So this temperature in here isn't that much different than the outside temperature. So I don't have to spend as much time hardening off. But if you're going from directly inside to outside, in my opinion, you want to spend at least a week hardening your plants off. Maybe the first day, bringing them to a shady area that's protected with very little wind for about an hour a day. The next day, bring them out for 2 hours. Then maybe the next day after that, bring them out in the morning and see if they can take the whole day. You want to make sure plants can go at least a day or two outside in their temperatures before you actually transplant them into the ground. This is going to be very important for eliminating or reducing transplant shock. The fifth mistake I often see people making when growing their own seedlings has to do with not timing the transplant correctly. After you've hardened your plants off and you know they're ready to transplant, the timing of that transplant is going to make a big difference. For instance, the best time to transplant, I believe, is on a cloudy day or on a day when it's just drizzling a little bit, sort of like today. But you don't want it to be too windy. Another thing is, if you really can't find a day where it's going to be relatively cloudy, I suggest you do that transplanting in the evening. This way, the plants have plenty of time before the sun comes up, the strong sun, so they can get used to their new home. Before you begin to transplant what you're going to be growing, I suggest you take a little peek into the future and check what the weather is going to be for the next 10 or 15 days or so. That's what I like to do, because you don't want to put your transplants out if you're going to be getting a frost or something coming up soon, or really windy days, because you could actually set your plants back. If you do get a surprise frost or a cool night coming up, a good easy trick is to just take a empty water jug, a gallon one, and just throw it over your plants. What this is going to do is create almost like a small greenhouse effect, so the frost doesn't drop down and kill your plants, and this could even work to prevent some wind. You could keep it like this and then just bring some of the wood chips or whatever you have around the base of it, holding it in place, and you won't have to deal with all the drawbacks that come with frost or even some strong wind on your young plants. When you're growing your own seedlings and putting out your own transplants, not everything is going to go perfect every time. There's going to be little failures in there. But I heard a quote that has always stuck with me, and it said that every failure, every mistake brings with it the seed of an equal or even greater benefit. So it's about learning from those mistakes, not just making the same ones over and over again, but learning and making some changes, tweaking what you're doing to get more out of it. And Joel Salatin also says that if something's worth doing, it's worth doing it wrong until you can get it right. As opposed to that old saying, if it's worth doing it right. So Joel kind of lets us know that if it's got true value, then it's worth kind of almost failing your way to success sometimes. But like I said, it's easier to learn from someone else who made the same mistakes, but sometimes we have to learn the hard way. As you can see, I transplanted out some of my tomatoes already, earlier than any year I've ever done it. But I'm willing to take the chance this year because I've got a lot of extras if things don't go perfectly. And also I've got those water jugs that I can use if things get hairy, and I'm also going to use pots like this. So if I think it's going to be cold or frost overnight, I'll just take this pot, drop it over the top of the tomato. That'll help protect it. But I really want to do what I can to get as early of harvest as I can, because sometimes, you can only wait so long to get the fresh Jersey tomatoes. Nothing like it, ever. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. You'll notice around my plants I still have the cups here because I haven't knocked the stakes in yet, so I can label them. I usually just label on the stakes, and I have to go harvest them locally. If you want me to bring you along, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share with your friends. Do not forget to ring that bell so every time we upload, you know. Tuck and James Prigioni, we